Hello everyone, this is Dan again with another video. I wanted to cover a topic that's been an issue for some time within kind of the anti-feminist slash manosphere community. And basically this issue is, of course, we have a lot of women and some men who come into the community or start making content that's supposedly anti-feminist in nature, and some of it is and some of it isn't. But there are definitely a lot of women who claim that they support the basic origins of feminism. They support what feminism once was as it began, but they're anti-feminist now due to the stuff that they see as negative that is involved in the feminist movement today. And they've been criticized for this widely, and especially by MGTOW, but there are other men who are MRAs who see them as important, and you have these women who, like that Cassie J, who claimed that they were feminist, and now they're not feminist, and they see some of the hypocrisy that's involved in a lot of the feminist doctrine, but they still believe that the initial goals of feminism were admirable, or that that they would support them today. And they try to say that you see a lot of women who say that they're against second wave or third wave feminism, but that they support how feminism actually began as a movement. The problem that I have with this, that I'm going to illustrate in this video, is that there's a common theme with every wave of feminism. And I'm not just talking about the characteristics that it involves, women just getting rights for not having to do anything. I'm not going to go into those kinds of things where I criticize feminism itself, because that I can do that in other videos, and that's been done aplenty by other producers. Um, there's a lot of knowledge already that feminism in itself has always been about just alleviating women of responsibility, making it to where they don't have to be accountable to men or to their children or to anything else, and that basically each wave just continues to get worse in regard to that, but that it's not really anything that empowers women. It just alleviates them from doing virtually anything and playing the role that women used to have to play. And basically it makes them worthless to men. That's a big part of why men are going their own way to begin with. But in this video I wanted to talk not so much about the characteristics of the feminist movement, but what each wave has in common, and why essentially, if you are someone who supports the ideas of first wave feminism, if you think that feminism was the movement that needed to be made, that needed to exist to give women the right to vote, for example, then you are a feminist just as much as someone today who wants to kill all men, hashtag kill all men, or who, if you want to be a little bit less extreme, at the very least believes in things like the wage gap, and, focusing on just doing more for women because they just somehow deserve it. And so when you break down the different waves of feminism, yes, there are differences, of course. There are differences in goals and tactics and whatnot. But if you just break them down wave from wave, you'll see that they have something in common. And, to describe the differences, I guess, in the first wave of feminism, it was about basic political rights, the right to vote, the right to hold political office or run for political office, the right to, basically do some of the basic things that men did in society, like having a job outside the home to some extent, at least having the legal right to do that. Not that there weren't women, I'm sure, who worked out. I'm sure that there were women who worked outside the home for, years, decades prior to the beginning of the feminist movement. But, just this desire to kind of participate in the society, or this goal of being able to participate socially and politically, that was pretty much what the first wave of feminism was about. And the second wave, it was about securing kind of special rights for women, whether you're talking about reproductive rights, no fault divorce, the right to basically destroy a man in family law court without any sort of real due process, just the right to be protected against violence in a way that men have never been protected against violence, even though men have always overall, aside from rape, outside of the prison community, or just outside of rape in society, men have always been subjected to more violence than women. But women needed the Special Violence Against Women Act. So the second wave of feminism was about special privileges and protections. And then third wave feminism was about just kind of like dealing with nonsense issues like the wage gap, or man spreading, or just not having to essentially take responsibility for your own choices as an individual, being able to just blame men for all of your problems. And then fourth wave feminism is pretty much the continuation of third wave. I find it difficult to define third wave and fourth wave feminism separately. But the wave that we're seeing now, which is supposedly fourth wave, is just basically hatred toward men. It's just basically, saying it's the final kind of effort to make men second-class citizens in their own society. And this is in a society that still expects men to act like men, whatever that means. To be the backbone of society. In other words, men will, the effort is to make men second-class citizens and make it to where no matter what the facts are, you as a man just don't have any rights. An effort to make it to where men who are accused of domestic violence, that they won't get due process and may have to go into a civil court and essentially prove their own innocence. The yes means yes stuff for, just blatant discrimination against men, legally speaking and socially speaking. That to me is fourth wave feminism. So we've gone from basic political rights to special privileges and rights to basically finding problems that aren't there, and now to just blaming men for everything. That's pretty much the progression of feminism. So again, you see some of these anti-feminists, especially of course, anti-feminist women primarily, who basically they say that, well, they're against feminism, but they support the initial efforts that the feminists had in mind. They support political equality for women. They support women being able to go out and be supposedly independent and all that. But they draw the line somewhere between the initial goals of feminism and where we are now, whether they just don't want men to think that they hate them, or whether they, don't support abortion rights, or they don't support other special protections for women, or somewhere in between. A lot of these anti-feminist women, supposedly anti-feminist women, will draw the line between, the initial focus of feminism as far as their political and social goals are concerned, and what they don't like now based on what they see feminism doing as a political movement. So my criticism is this: all feminism is the same at its core. And what I mean by that is the underlying theory of feminism has not changed. The underlying theory is patriarchy, in a negative sense, not a literal patriarchy, but the patriarchy theory, the idea that women have been kept down by men basically throughout all of time. And that's not an exaggeration. That's what feminists believe, that women have been kept down, that women can do all the same things that men can do. Men and women are equal. And the only reason why women haven't been successful in the same ways that men have been successful is because men have just been abusive. Men have suppressed them. They've suppressed their rights and they've treated women badly. And as a result, women are victims, basically. Throughout all of history, women have been victimized by men. And it's not that there have been changes in society and changes, I should say, in technology and standard of living. It's that, and this is patriarchy theory. It's that, women have just been abused and victimized, and they can do everything a man can do, but they can do it better if only given a fair chance. And of course, none of the evidence supports patriarchy theory, and that's a problem in itself. That's why feminism in itself is nonsense, or it's totally based on nonsense. But the point that I'm making is this was the theory of feminism right from the start. And there have been many people like Girl Writes What and others who have talked about this kind of thing where, there were no conditions for giving women the right to vote. There was nothing that women did to earn this. It was just based on victim status. It was just based on, okay, women deserve to have political rights. They deserve to be able to go out and act like men, essentially, do the same things that men do, just because they've been oppressed. They deserve to have these rights the same as men. It wasn't that, there was actually a case made for why women, in a logical sense, should be able to join in this form of participation. There was no logical argument as far as, okay, women have never been the same as men and they've never been equal to men. This would be like an alternative theory, or an idea, at least, for an alternative theory to patriarchy. The case could have been made that, well, men and women aren't the same, but women deserve the right to vote because changes in technology and, basically the Industrial Revolution and the results thereof have made it to where women can just do more. And as a result of that, they can participate in the workforce, they can participate in paying taxes, and they can participate in the political system. No argument was made like that. And then, of course, the counter argument in that discussion would probably be something like, well, women are still not rational and they still make decisions based on emotion. So no, you don't get to vote. And that debate could have been had and the decision could have been made one way or the other. But unless you believe that something like that should have taken place rather than what did take place, which was women complained and men acquiesced, men did what women wanted them to do based on the idea that these poor women were victims and they just deserved the right to vote. Unless you have a different view on what the origins of reform should have been as far as gender relations are concerned, if there should have been a reform at all, unless you can logically justify women being able to participate politically, even at that level, you are just as much of a feminist. If you support women just being given these rights based on victim status, you are just as much of a feminist as the fourth wave feminist who wants to reduce the amount of men in the population, or who, just wants men to be second-class citizens and just sees them as utilities. You're no different. That's the issue that I have with all of this, is that the same theory applies to each wave of feminism. And this is something that I've learned, back when I was actually in college, through my studies of politics and social movements and stuff. Not that I'm a huge expert at these things, but I've learned that the results that you get are only as good as your theory. The interpretations that you can draw, the ability that you can have to make policy decisions, they're only as good as your theory. And if your theory is based on crap to begin with, it doesn't matter what you try to do with that. It doesn't matter whether you're a moderate or a radical or somewhere in between as far as implementing your theory is concerned. You are still building a house on sand. And that's the problem with feminism. there are many problems with feminism. It's essentially a cancer in our society, just like every other cultural Marxist cancer in our society. That essentially is what's flawed about it, is that it's based on Marxism. It's based on one group being victimized by another group without any sort of historical or rational basis for that kind of claim. But, ultimately, when it comes to the theory of feminism, it doesn't matter whether you're a first wave feminist, a second wave feminist, third or fourth wave, you believe in patriarchy theory. So for these anti-feminist, supposedly anti-feminist women who come on here and say, oh, I think women should have been given the right to vote, and I believe in abortion rights, and I think women still have certain issues, but I don't think it's fair to men now. The problem is it's never been fair to men. The theory itself is flawed. If the theory itself is based on something that's not true, which in this case is based on the idea that women have just been oppressed by men, that men are bad and women are good, and if you want sort of social justice between men and women, between the genders, you have to do for women and take from men. That has been what feminism is about from the beginning. So, yes, you could make the case that women should have been given the right to vote, but it can't be based on what actually happened. You actually have to justify it on based on, even if you're an egalitarian and you say that, well, I think men and women are just equal, so I do believe that women should be given the right to vote. But I don't think that women were oppressed. It's that, for some other reason, they weren't given the right to vote. Even in that case, you could at least claim that you're not a feminist. I don't agree with that argument. It doesn't make sense because you can see, based on all the things that men have always done for any successful society, that men and women are essentially not equal. Men and women developed into different types of creatures, essentially. Men and women are very different from one another. And men are extremely necessary to do most things in society, while women are extremely necessary to have children and to raise a family. But all of that being said, feminism, no matter what brand or what wave you're looking at, is all based on the same theory. It's just like you can't have a good version of communism or anything that's based on Marxist thought, because your theory is shit. Your theory is based on, creating victim groups and using the government and, just treating the people who actually produce and who actually can lead society in a way that makes it to where they have no incentive to do so. And that's what you see with men, and that's what you see with MGTOW. But, ultimately, the problem that I have here is that whether, if you say that you support the initial goals of feminism, or whether you think that, feminism should have stopped after its second wave or its third wave, it shouldn't be about man hating. You even see Emma Watson and he or she saying, oh, it shouldn't be about man hating. It doesn't make any difference. If you call yourself a feminist, not only are you a supremacist based on the actual goals of feminism now, but, feminism has always been a supremacist movement based on the idea that women are victims, based on the idea that men are the victimizers. That's the whole foundation for thinking that women should just be given rights and then special privileges and then nonsense privileges and so forth. That's been the whole basis of the feminist movement this whole time. So when you say that, oh, you're not a feminist, you're an anti-feminist because you don't support just hating men, all you're saying really is that you're a more moderate feminist, that you don't believe in interpreting patriarchy theory and feminist doctrine in a way that has such a radical interpretation and result. You don't believe in interpreting it in a way that alienates men the way they are. Most likely because you see men as utilities and tools for your disposal or at your disposal. But regardless of the motivations involved for a particular woman, if you say that you're an anti-feminist, but then you support all the things that feminism initially went after, then you're a feminist. That you support the same theory that feminists support, but or that those who openly call themselves feminists, you support the same ideas that they support, but you're not willing to wear that same label, and ultimately, you know, you're contradicting yourself. You're inconsistent with your viewpoints. So, like I say, a woman who says that she's anti-feminist but still supports the initial goals of feminism, it's like a Nazi who didn't support the Second World War. It's like, oh, I voted for Hitler, but I didn't know that we'd have this effort for global domination. I wouldn't have gone that far with it. Or it's like a secessionist in the South during, around the late 1850s, early 1860s, as the Civil War began. It's like a secessionist who didn't believe in slavery. I don't really support slavery, so I'm not like these other secessionists. I wouldn't fight a war over slavery. I just think that the Union, should have given us the right to be independent. Or it's like a socialist who says that, he wants all of these welfare programs, but then says, oh, I believe that you should have the right to keep your property. I wouldn't support completely giving, property rights to the government. I wouldn't support, taking away the land that you own necessarily in every case. So I'm not like those other socialists. I'm not really, I'm an anti-socialist. I'm a capitalist. No, you're not. Because you're a more moderate version of what you claim to be, even if it's true, even if you are more moderate, even if you're a feminist who doesn't want to kill all men, even if you're a socialist who says, I don't want to take everyone's land away, or, like I say, you were a Nazi, but you didn't want to actually be part of the Second World War. It doesn't make any difference. If you believe in the underlying theory of whatever movement you support, whether you consciously support it or not, once you say, hey, I do believe in patriarchy theory, women should have just been given rights because, it wasn't fair that men prevented them from having those rights in the first place. It doesn't matter where you go after that. You may be a more moderate or a more radicalized version of someone with that ideology, but you still subscribe to feminist ideology. And, these anti-feminist women who start off by saying, oh, I don't support what feminism is now, but I don't have a problem with women being given political rights. So, don't get on me for supporting that. You're a feminist. You're no different if you're a woman who makes that claim, or anybody for that matter who makes that claim. You can hypothetically believe in, equality between men and women. You can hypothetically believe that for reforms needed to be made after the Industrial Revolution that would have led to just a healthier society for everyone, even in terms of gender relations. But you actually have to logically make the case for that, and you have to do it based on a different theory. If you're using patriarchy theory, you're a feminist. It doesn't matter where you would have drawn the line. It doesn't matter whether you support abortion rights. It doesn't matter whether you believe in the wage gap. If you believe in the initial efforts of feminism based on patriarchy theory, you're a feminist, and you need to stop calling yourself an anti-feminist if this describes you. If you support the initial goals of the movement, because you're really just a more moderate version of the modern day crazy feminist. You may not be a radical feminist, so to speak, but that's really irrelevant because you believe in the same ideology. You just don't like some of the results.